Why I don't respect feminism. I agree that no society is perfect. Yes, we still have both sexism and rape, as well as unfair expectations of both men and women, but I don't see the modern feminist movement doing anything to help any of that. I actually see them actively making those things worse. Feminists continue to complain about wanting the same rights as men, but when pressed to list which rights men have which women don't in this Western democracy of ours, they can't name any. That's why they resort to pointing to the supposed wage gap, which I and many others have already debunked, and the so-called rape culture which they claim celebrates and protects rapists, the very notion of which is absurd considering a rape accusation is all it takes to ruin a man's life, even if it's completely unfounded. They spread fallacious theories about domestic violence being a tool of the patriarchy, which men use to keep women under control, ignoring the fact that nearly half of all domestic abuse victims are men, and that more than 2/3 of domestic violence is perpetrated by women. They point to depictions of women in media and claim it normalizes sexist attitudes and rape, without providing any data to back it up. And they point to Barbie dolls and claim it perpetuates unrealistic standards of beauty, while completely ignoring the standards enforced by overly muscled He-Man action figures which arguably promote the idealized male form as being an aggressive and overly muscled warrior who should be willing to endanger his own life when duty calls. And let's not forget the portrayal of fathers in media. How many fictional fathers can you think of who aren't stupid and grossly negligent Homer Simpson archetypes who, if it weren't for the benefit of a sensitive and intelligent wife to straighten him out, would be a domestic abuser? I don't see any feminists complaining about that. Whether they are doing it with willful intent or just out of gross ignorance, the feminist movement is actively creating an unequal society. We now live in a nation where men are always presumed to be the aggressors in domestic violence cases, despite data which suggests the contrary. A woman can sue a man for child support if she gets pregnant after raping him, and a man can lose his job just at the mere accusation of sexual harassment. The idea of a rape culture has been so deeply ingrained into campus culture that men are now required to attend consent seminars as if prejudged as potential rapists just for being men, and men are so afraid of being falsely accused of rape that they avoid going anywhere alone because they want a witness to testify on their behalf as to where they've been. Even in grade school, normal boy behavior has been pathologized to the point where 1 in 7 boys are diagnosed with ADHD and put on pills. The feminist movement has vilified men to the point where any injustice men face is now seen as justified, and this is institutionalized. This inequality is encoded in law, enforced among employees at corporations, and perpetrated by college administrations. This is systemic sexism. Our society considers men disposable, and it always has. Women aren't subjected to selective service. They're the first ones to be rescued in a disaster. It's completely acceptable for a woman to hit a man but not the other way around, and nobody bats an eye at a homeless man, but a homeless woman is such a tragedy that she gets all of the handouts. Hell, up until a few years ago, the FBI defined rape in such a way that men can almost never legally be considered victims, and there are no domestic abuse shelters for men. I've never seen a feminist speak out against any of this, but I have seen at least a few feminists fight in support of these things. With all of this in mind, it makes me sick when I see feminists complain about such trivial nonsense as manspreading, catcalling, and fictional characters being just a little too busty. The modern Western feminist lives such a comfortable life that she has the time to complain about a guy spreading his legs too far apart on the subway, and if she wanted to, she could cut his penis off and the female hosts of a daytime talk show would laugh about it, and so would their audience. But I'm the one who's sexist if I complain about it because, according to feminist theory, I have privilege, and the power structure gives advantages to men. What advantages? They can't say, but because of this power structure, sexism towards men doesn't exist. According to feminism, I am so privileged that I don't even have the right to talk about gender issues. All of my opinions on the subject are automatically invalid because I am a man, and if I wanted to talk about any of this at a university, feminists would sign petitions to ban me as a rape apologist. If that didn't work, they would draw signs and protest outside the lecture hall, yelling slogans and calling anyone who dared to attend the lecture sexist scum. I am a man. I am evil, I am disposable, I am privileged, and the feminist movement doesn't care about me because my male tears are delicious. The thing is, I actually do care about gender equality. I will gladly point out real sexism when I see it being done against women, something which Western feminists bafflingly neglect to do when it's being perpetrated by anyone who isn't a straight white male in a Western country. But feminists don't return the favor. Their narrative is that I am the cause of all the world's problems, and I have to be the one to change, to make sacrifices, and give more and more to them because of this imaginary boogeyman called the patriarchy, which they claim gives me all of the systemic advantages in society despite everything I just listed. The concept of a patriarchy is central to their ideology, and this core makes the ideology paint me as the oppressor and the villain, and I'm sick of it. I'm not a catcaller, I'm not a wife beater, I'm not a rapist, but I'm held accountable for the actions of the few men who do these things, and that's bullshit. And it's exactly the type of bullshit being perpetrated by BuzzFeed, Salon, Everyday Feminism, and Jezebel. The idea that men are the problem, that we should be ashamed of what we are, and that masculinity is toxic and needs to be stamped out. And it's this mentality that has led to most of the inequalities that I listed above. Feminists may claim they don't hate men, but actions speak louder than words. Even the people who call themselves feminists who don't spread these falsehoods are still in the same bag as far as I'm concerned. Feminism is inherently anti-male, and it's anti-male because it's entirely predicated on the notion that there exists a patriarchy which unilaterally privileges men to the detriment of women. The fact that no feminist can name a legal right men have which women don't, while I can name several women have which men don't, makes this idea demonstrably false. But since feminism hinges on the narrative of perpetual systemic female victimhood at the hands of a male-controlled society, they can't acknowledge the systemic inequalities faced by men. They have to ignore or deny the realities of male victims of domestic abuse who are denied recourse, the high rate of male suicide, the difficulties faced by men and boys in education, the high rate of male homelessness, and so on. In this worldview, men are the oppressors, the rapists, the wife-beaters, and the enemies. Men can never be the victims because any acknowledgement that maybe men don't have it so great is an admission that the idea that our male-controlled society favors men may not be so valid, and that maybe women are perpetual victims of the big bad patriarchy after all. Feminism needs legitimacy, so it needs a villain to fight against, so they cling to this false narrative about men keeping women down with a system designed to keep men at the top, and so they must refuse to acknowledge that men are also the ones making up the bottom. They need the patriarchy. They need a windmill to fight. If these people really believed in equality, without also believing all of the inequalities that exist between the genders are unilaterally slated in favor of men at the expense of women, they wouldn't call themselves feminists. They would call themselves egalitarians. But they don't do that. Instead, they engage in damage control and insist that feminism is about equality because it says so in the dictionary, and in doing so they demonstrate that they don't really care about equality. What they really care about is the label and their ability to claim a monopoly on equality. But you cannot claim to be a movement for equality between the genders when you are exclusively concerned with the issues of one to the complete exclusion of the other. But that's what feminism is all about, and that's why I don't respect feminism. If you call yourself a feminist but you agree that all of the things I've talked about are wrong, then you need to stop calling yourself a feminist. It is a toxic label. You don't need to call yourself a feminist to be an advocate for equality. Feminism doesn't hold a monopoly on that as much as they like to think they do. And if you truly value equality, you will drop the feminist label and stop trying to defend it because it is destructive, divisive, counterintuitive, and predicated on lies and misinformation. Feminism is bullshit, and it is unworthy of respect.